The film begins in a peaceful village in India, where a man named Shiva lives with his family. Shiva is a caring father and husband with 3 children. His eldest son, Morgan, is about to be matched with a girl from a nearby village. When Morgan first sees her, he is mesmerized by her beauty. Later that night, after the matchmaking ceremony, Shiva and his 2 sons are out guarding their garden from wild animals. Shiva's second son, Chidambaram, spots a wild boar that could damage their crops. Without wasting time, Shiva and his sons head out to hunt the boar. Unfortunately, their beloved dog gets electrocuted by a wire fence that belongs to a man named Rajesh. The next morning, Shiva and some villagers go to Rajesh's house to confront him about the dangerous electric fence. Out of everyone, only Morgan is brave enough to speak up, asking Rajesh to remove the fence. But Rajesh's response only makes things worse, leaving the villagers, including Shiva, feeling helpless, as they are just simple farmers. The next day, Rajesh was shocked to find that his electric fence had been damaged. It was Morgan who did it because he was fed up with Rajesh's arrogance in controlling the village. A few days later, more trouble started, but this time it was Rajesh's son and his friends. They carelessly took water from the well that belonged to Shiva and his family, saying that the water was for everyone. This led to a small argument that got tense. Suddenly, Morgan showed up, and a fight broke out. Because of this, Morgan was taken to the police station. The next morning, Shiva went to see Rajesh with the village council to talk about Morgan and the well that caused the problem. It turned out that Rajesh had bought most of the farmers' land in the village to build factories, shops, and other modern buildings. Shiva was the only one who didn't sell his land, including the well, which was on his property. Rajesh tried to take control of the well by convincing the village council, who were close to him. As for Morgan, who was still in the police station, Rajesh refused to drop the charges because Morgan had hurt his son. Rajesh said he would only drop the charges if Shiva bowed down at his feet and at the feet of everyone in the village. After spending 3 hours bowing at the feet of the villagers, Shiva returned home, feeling weak and exhausted. He asked his wife not to tell Morgan about what he had done to protect their son's feelings and to make sure Morgan wouldn't cause more trouble. That night, Morgan came home with a bruised face after being beaten by the police sent by Rajesh. Meanwhile, Chidambaram, who didn't know what had happened, told Morgan about how their father was forced by Rajesh to bow under the feet of the entire village. Hearing how his father was humiliated made Morgan furious. In his anger, Morgan secretly went to find Rajesh while he was in a public toilet and slapped him with his sandals to shame him. Rajesh couldn't accept this humiliation, but he was too embarrassed to tell his men about it. Instead, Rajesh, being clever and sneaky, hired a group of hunters who were also hitmen to secretly kill Morgan. Morgan was caught in their trap when they wrapped a wire around his neck. And Chidambaram, who was there but couldn't help, was told to run away. In the end, Morgan tragically lost his life. A little while later, Shiva arrived at the scene, but Morgan was already gone. With his uncle and Chidambaram, Shiva reported what happened to the police. However, since the police were on Rajesh's side, Shiva didn't receive any help and had to return home. The next morning, Morgan's mother saw many birds flying over the fields. Shiva and the villagers quickly went to the spot, only to find that the birds were eating Morgan's body. Heartbroken, Shiva and his wife, Pachaya, went to the police to report the tragedy. But as always, the authorities in the village were loyal to Rajesh and didn't care at all about the suffering of simple farmers like Shiva. For days, Shiva and Pachaya were overwhelmed with sadness, feeling like they had no reason to keep going. Their youngest daughter, Meera, was left in the care of Chidambaram, their second child. Seeing his parents so brokenhearted, Chidambaram, who knew how to make explosives to scare off wild animals, secretly decided to make some to get revenge on Rajesh. He quietly waited for the right moment to act. One day, Pachaya told Shiva that she had noticed something strange about their son and had found some explosives missing from the storage. Shiva quickly understood that Chidambaram was planning to take revenge on Rajesh. At the moment when Chidambaram was ready to carry out his plan, Shiva appeared and turned off the streetlights, helping his son stay hidden. Chidambaram went ahead and stabbed Rajesh, then ran away, throwing explosives at the people chasing him. Meanwhile, Shiva rushed home and told his family to pack up quickly and leave. As they discussed Chidambaram's actions, he returned home, pretending nothing had happened. Shiva, feeling exhausted, slapped Chidambaram and told his brother-in-law to take Pachaya and Meera to an old friend's house in the neighboring village for safety. Shiva and Chidambaram would take a different route through the forest to avoid the police and Rajesh's men. At Rajesh's house, his son Vijay learned that a witness had seen Chidambaram stab his father. Vijay immediately ordered his men to find the hunter group and track down Chidambaram. At that time, Shiva and Chidambaram were walking along a river, and after they crossed to the other side, Shiva showed how clever he was. He told Chidambaram to walk backward, making it harder for their pursuers to track them. After some time, they reached a rocky hill. Shiva told his son to rest because the next morning, they would begin a long journey to meet Shiva's friend in the neighboring village. Meanwhile, Pachaya and Meera were still on their way with their uncle. They ran into some trouble when one of their goats got loose in the middle of the road, but luckily, it didn't take long, and the police passed without any issues. When they arrived in the neighboring village, Pachaya and Meera were kept safe in a villager's house. However, Rajesh's men threatened to kill anyone who helped Shiva's family, so Pachaya and Meera had to leave the village. The next morning, Shiva and Chidambaram continued their journey through cornfields and hills. When they finally reached the village, Shiva asked Chidambaram to wait while he spoke to one of the villagers to find out about Pachaya and Meera. Shiva was shocked when he learned that Pachaya and Meera had left the village the night before. One of the villagers apologized, saying they couldn't help anymore because they had been threatened by Vijay's men. When Shiva returned to where he had left Chidambaram, he couldn't find him. After looking around, Shiva finally saw Chidambaram roasting a rabbit, saying he was very hungry. This made Shiva really angry because it was Chidambaram's actions that had caused all their troubles. Now, they didn't even know where Pachaya and Meera were. Instead of apologizing, Chidambaram got upset at being scolded and stormed off. Suddenly, the hunters arrived. Even though Shiva wasn't a fighter, he bravely took on all the hunters by himself, even though he struggled at times. But Chidambaram, always causing trouble, got himself captured by the leader of the hunters. Watching Shiva continue to fight, the leader got frustrated and finally let Chidambaram go, deciding to face Shiva directly. At that time, Shiva had the chance to kill the leader, who was responsible for his eldest son's death. But Shiva, not wanting to be controlled by anger, chose not to do it and spared the hunters' lives. Afterward, while washing his face in the river, Chidambaram asked his father about his past. Chidambaram kept asking until Shiva finally agreed to share his story. When Shiva was younger, he was known for making the best liquor in the village. Because of his unique skills, he was promoted to head of production at his employer's factory. One day, Shiva went to his employer and asked if his close friend, who didn't have a job, could work at the factory. Since the employer trusted Shiva, he agreed to hire Shiva's friend. Shiva had a friend named Vikram, who was very thankful for the help Shiva gave him. Vikram worked hard and was eventually promoted to factory treasurer, becoming a trusted person to their employer. But as time passed, Vikram started to forget who had helped him. When soon after, Shiva asked Vikram for some financial help to pay for his younger sibling's school fees, Vikram arrogantly refused, saying he needed to save money. This made Shiva very angry, and he slapped and beat Vikram. At that time, Shiva had a girlfriend named Mary Amal, a high school student. He promised to marry her after she graduated. To show his love, Shiva ordered a special pair of sandals from Mary Amal from Ariv, the owner of a handmade sandal shop. Thanks to the sandals, Mary Amal no longer had to walk barefoot to school, which was something only a few people in the village could afford. However, Vikram was still angry about being slapped by Shiva. After school, Vikram found Mary Amal and took his anger out on her. He forced her to walk around the village with the sandals on her head while kicking and beating her. No one dared to help her. Later that evening, Shiva's mother-in-law told him what had happened to Mary Amal and how she was humiliated because of the sandals he had given her. Hearing this, Shiva became furious and immediately went to confront Vikram to settle things once and for all. After beating Vikram with sandals, Shiva and his friends tied Vikram and his followers to a tree. When the new boss arrived, he didn't believe Shiva's side of the story. Vikram, being clever and sneaky, managed to trick the boss into believing him instead. The boss then told Shiva to untie Vikram immediately. Even when Shiva tried to explain what really happened, the boss accused Shiva of being shameless and not minding his own business. As a result, Shiva was fired in a very humiliating way for something that wasn't even his fault. And Vikram, still holding a grudge, got permission from his boss to gather his men and burn down Mariamal's house. Shiva was heartbroken when he found Mariamal badly burned and dying. Their dreams of getting married were shattered because of Vikram's cruel actions. Full of rage, Shiva grabbed a machete and stormed into the boss's house, threatening anyone who tried to protect Vikram. Since the boss was involved in what happened to Mariamal, Shiva didn't hesitate to deal with him too. That's the story of Shiva's past, before he moved to a new village and met Pachaya, who became Chidambaram's mother. There, Shiva realized that his uncontrollable anger had ruined everything. His inability to control his emotions caused all the chaos in his life. From that point on, Shiva changed. He became a person who always kept his emotions in check and decided to stay calm, even when others treated him unfairly. Finally, Shiva and Chidambaram reunited with Pachaya and Meera in the city. Realizing that things couldn't go on like this, Shiva decided to meet with the village council and the police to sit down with Rajesh's family to find a solution to the ongoing conflict. During the discussion, Rajesh Singh, Vijay's uncle, agreed to make peace, but only under one condition: that they demanded all of Shiva's land as compensation for the chaos that had happened. At that time, Shiva, who only wanted peace and a quiet life, agreed to the deal. He valued his son, Chidambaram, more than the land and was willing to give it up to end the conflict. But what happened next was unexpected. Rajesh Singh and Vijay turned out to be just as sneaky as Rajesh. They secretly kidnapped Chidambaram when he was alone, without Shiva or his family knowing. Later that night, as Shiva and his family were praying, a villager rushed in, shouting that Chidambaram had been beaten up by Rajesh Singh and Vijay. And Shiva, who had finally hoped for some peace, felt his anger rise once again. Without wasting any time, Shiva put on his head covering and went after them. Forced to become the fierce person he once was, Shiva showed no mercy to anyone who stood in his way this time. After everything had happened, Shiva hurt Vijay. Seeing that, Rajesh Singh was frozen in fear. Unable to accept his nephew's death, Rajesh Singh tried to help his men. However, since he wasn't a fighter, Shiva easily took him hostage. Suddenly, Shiva fell after being stabbed, and Chidambaram was caught in the chaos. Despite the pain, Shiva grabbed a spear and managed to defeat Rajesh Singh from behind. With both Rajesh Singh and Vijay gone, Shiva quickly carried Chidambaram and rushed him home. Sometime later, Shiva was found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Before leaving, Shiva entrusted Chidambaram with the responsibility of protecting their family, as he was now the only man left to take care of them. The film ends. The moral lesson from this film is, if you're going to roast a rabbit, don't start a village war first. And remember, anger management is probably better than swinging machetes around.